Welcome. If you seek truth, the truth shall set you free. Fear not. And now the agenda with Crystal Risotti.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Agenda with Crystal Risotti. I'm the host, Crystal, and I want to welcome you to the show tonight, and thank you for joining. The topic tonight is going to be a little bit different. I keep saying tonight. You might be watching it during the day, during the morning. It's okay. We tape at night, so just know that. The topic today is going to be one that is very controversial for me because I have been, kind of attacked on social media for my positions on it. But again, as you know, I don't make positions without bringing the receipts. So the topic tonight is going to be about anime and manga and the influence towards the LGBTQ plus community. When I say influence, I want to stress the fact that no anime and manga is 100% bad, okay? There's anime and manga that's fine. There's anime and manga that isn't fine. And how do you know the difference? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to help you understand the difference and what to look for and the risks around it. So one thing that we know is when children have thoughts, when we plant seeds of thoughts into their minds, those seeds get planted, curiosity takes hold, and they entertain those thoughts, and those can turn into actions. So we need to be very cautious as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, family members, leader positions with kids on what we allow them to see and absorb into their minds and the seeds that we plant, because we want to guard that, especially if you're a family of faith. Brains don't fully develop until around the age of 25. So they're very impressionable up to that point. Kids are very impressionable, and young adults. And there used to be an old statement, garbage in, garbage out. GIGO is what we used to abbreviate it for. And that's exactly true with our minds. And the Bible teaches us that we need to guard our minds so that we aren't influenced by worldly things and carnal things that can negatively impact us. The influence of LGBTQ plus and fantasy themes draw a unique audience. They're like, not all people are into anime and manga. Not all kids are into anime and manga. You may not even know what anime and manga are, but you will soon. And you have heard of it. You have seen it in places. You just don't know you have. And I'll explain that in a bit. Many that are drawn to this type of medium, either one, manga or anime, are very much on the autism spectrum. Not all, but there's increasing studies that are being done to track that. And they're finding that many of the kids who are drawn to it are on the autism or ADHD, ADD spectrum, however you want to call it. That's not, to me, that's extortion. It's exploiting these kids, influencing towards worldly culture, and taking advantage of, people call it a disability. I actually think those kids are very special. They're smart. They're very intellectual. They're just a little different. As we talked before about gender ideology, there are many factors that can contribute to gender dysphoria. Social media, anime and manga can be an influence. Chat rooms like Discord or Reddit can be an influence. It leads to a whole subculture, though, a lot of times. I don't know anybody who really is into anime and manga, and if you are on a very low level, let me know in the comments. But most of the people that I know that are into anime and manga are really into it. They get absorbed into it, and it becomes part of a subculture. It is part of a subculture. That subculture of people tend to then gravitate towards conventions, cosplay, even the furries. I want you to be aware of that. My position has never been that correlation is causation. I don't believe that a correlative situation with a child who may be even on the spectrum or not, being into anime and manga, that's not going to say that they're going to end up transgender. That's just not a thing. But as parents, as grandparents, as family members, as leaders of children, we need to know the risks. I'm big on risk assessments. I'm in quality assurance, so that's a big thing in QA. You always look at the risk profile. So as long as you acknowledge the risks and then make an educated decision to move forward with it anyway or allow it, that's your choice, okay? But there's so many people I talk to who are just completely unaware of what's going on in this subculture. That's where I feel like my role is to educate you all. Pokémon is an example of how young children are targeted and drawn to the subculture. Everybody's heard of Pokémon. That is both anime and manga. There are manga books and anime, I call them cartoons, animations, that are Pokémon shows and books. That's an example that everybody knows about because little kids are still to this day, and it's been around a very long time. My son was into it when he was 3 and he's 30. So he got into it in 1997. It was already around then. It's been around so long. And I have a position where I think that whenever the world gravitates towards something, I need to question it. Because we're in the world, but we're not of this world. This world is not our home as Christians. So to be drawn to something like that, it can become overwhelming. It can become an addiction. Just like anything else, it can become something that replaces, our relationship with God or our time with God. And anything that does that is wrong. So we have to be careful with that. And I also believe that this subculture is a cult. And the reason I say that, let me give you the definition from the Merriam-webster dictionary. The definition of a cult is a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work. Just a great devotion. There are so many things in our culture now that people are willing to die for that are not godly. They're not godly at all. They're carnal things. They can be things of a sinful nature. They can be things that take us away from our relationship with the Lord and be a distraction to us. And don't forget, the Bible says that the thief came to kill, destroy, but Jesus came so that we would have life more abundantly. So the enemy is out there tempting us all the time. And we just need to be aware of that and see it through spiritual filters and spiritual eyes. Let's go with slide 1. What does the Bible say in regard to this type of thing, the anime and manga? I associate that with the mind. And so I did research and found verses that specifically deal with the mind. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." The key words there are, don't be conformed to this world. That's what I was talking about earlier. Anytime the world gravitates towards something, I am cautious of it because the world is worldly. The world is not, the Bible says that the way to heaven is narrow, but the way to hell is broad, and many there will be that find that. So few there will be that find the path to heaven, right? To me, when you have anything that's massively accepted on a global scale or embraced, or a trend that comes through that people seem to gravitate towards, in my mind, the majority of people are not truly Christians. So I have that skepticism in my mind, and I tend to go down rabbit holes and research it for that reason. And almost every time I find things that we should be scared of. We should be scared of, skeptical of, cautious of. Let's go back to the slide. The next verse is 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. It says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." This is the verse I want you to focus on. Casting down, look what the Bible says, imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Now that's the end goal, right? That's not something we can do all day long, every day, without fail. We're weak. We're not strong enough to bring every thought into the obedience of Christ, but that's what we strive for. But the thing about that verse that struck me, anime and manga are all fantasy. They're not reality. I used to refer to them as comic books and cartoons. That's what they are. It's all fantasy. What does fantasy involve? Imaginations. And the Bible says casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Anime and manga are not godly. There's starting to be companies that are starting to create some medium in anime and manga that actually are based in Christianity. I'm so glad to see that because it's long overdue, I think. That'll be a welcome thing that we will embrace. But at this point, there's none out there. I'm just telling you. So we have to be careful that we don't allow this to overcome us. Let's go back to the slide. James 1:8 says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Why did I pull that verse? What do I mean by that? When your children go to church on Sunday for an hour, hopefully you're teaching them more than that at home, because 1 hour a week, I can tell you, is not enough. They get the Bible teaching there. They might get some at home. But then they're splitting that with the anime and manga, if they're into that. And so, to me, that's double-minded. They're splitting their time, their effort, their energy, their mind between two different things. And so, it says they're unstable in all their ways. We are unstable in all our ways, I should say, when we're like that. So just keep that in mind. Philippians 2:5 says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Okay, when we talk about that, I'm pretty sure Jesus wouldn't be watching anime or reading manga books. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be doing that. We do a lot of things that I think Jesus wouldn't be doing. Again, we still have to have entertainment. I understand that. The point of this is not to, again, label all anime and manga as bad, but I do want to show you some examples of some that you should be careful of, especially if your kids are into it, and guard their minds. Proverbs 23:7 says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. This goes back to what I was saying about we plant seeds, and then those seeds become thoughts that get entertained and can turn into actions. All right, so when it says, as you think in your heart, it's talking about the mind and the heart there. You're thinking in your heart about X, and that determines who you are. Again, think about the garbage in, garbage out. If your kids are sitting and watching this stuff all the time or reading it all the time, that's what's going to come out of them. Those actions are going to come out of them. You won't understand the impact of that until we get into this podcast and I actually show you what I'm talking about. Some of it's pretty bad. James 4:4 says, ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? That means it's against God. Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is an enemy of God. Again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about anytime the world gravitates towards something, I personally am skeptical of it. I think we're wise to do that. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but do your homework. Investigate it first. Let's talk about definitions. What am I talking about when I say anime? Anime, the definition of it is hand-drawn and computer-generated animation that originates from Japan. So that doesn't sound that bad. It's just Japanese animation. All it is. Manga is basically comic books and cartoons in Japan. Outside of Japan, comics originally published in Japan. So it originated in Japan, it's gone out into the world, but they're still originally published in Japan. What is cosplay? When we talk about cosplay, we're going to talk more about that in the next episode, but this is all part of the subculture. Cosplay is Japanese costume play, so it's costume drama. We host Gen Con here in Indianapolis, and I think it's kind of fun to go drive around and look at everybody dressed up, because people that go to Gen Con typically are in their costumes, and it's kind of fun seeing thousands of people walking around downtown in costumes. It can be a fun thing for sure. It's not a bad thing in general, but it's part of this subculture. And then, of course, furries are humanoid animals. They're a subculture whose members enjoy dressing up as animals, cartoonish animals typically. And I have to tell you that that's also going to be something I'm going to talk about in the next episode. That's a hot topic now, but I can tell you it started as a sexual fetish back in, I'm going to say, at least the 80s. I'll tell you more about that later. Examples of anime and manga. You might have heard these different series. Pokémon, obviously, I think everybody's heard of Pokémon. That's not a new thing. It's been around for a really long time. I remember people playing Pokemon Go on their phones and walking around everywhere looking for Pokemon that weren't really there, but they're there on the phone. And you had to catch them, and you got points, and it was a big contest, big trend that happened here, everywhere actually. Then the next escalation from Pokemon is usually Digimon. There's Yu-Gi-Oh! That comes after that. Then some of the other isolated ones are Naruto, Berserk, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, and Hellboy. Those are just some examples. I went to give a presentation on this, and I found it so ironic. It was in Texas. When I left to go to the airport, I'm walking through, I went to the bookstore, like the little gift shop, for a little bit. And let's put up slide 2. This book was on the shelf, like featured. So it smacked me in the face. And I had just given a presentation on anime and manga. So this book's called The Ultimate Guide to Manga and Anime. It's a fan book magazine, and I had to pick it up. So I grabbed a copy of it because, I have a passion about this topic because I have a family member who was really into this from a young age, ended up doing a gender transition through hormones, broke a lot of people's hearts. So it hits home for me. And I, in retrospect, in analyzing everything, came to the conclusion that anime and manga played a huge part in that, which is why I'm giving these messages about it. Let's go to slide 3. It's been around for a really long time. You're going to see here that there's a date of 1854. It goes way, way back. But some of the stuff that it says here historically, to me, is not actually what we consider to be anime or manga nowadays. So I'm going to focus more on the more recent things. Let's go to slide 4. Look at this. It says God of Manga, Osamu Tezuka. He was a Disney fan that went into creating manga books. He started in 1946 with it, and then in 1967 he started to target adult audiences with it. And that has led to some of the things that we're going to talk about today about the different genres. It dates back to the early 1900s, but in the 50s, anime studios really took off in Japan. They multiplied like crazy in the 50s. Some of you who are older may remember Astro Boy. That was a premiere that took place in 1961. Osamu Tezuka created that series. And then in the 70s, it grew because he was then inspired by Disney, and so he tried to model things after Disney. The rise of it happened outside of Japan in the U.S. starting in the 1970s. It started to come to the U.S. then, but for many years, it was censored. So they couldn't put the original versions out. They had to censor it for the U.S., which isn't a bad thing in my mind. And then it really took off in the U.S. in the 1980s. Toonami. Some of you may remember Toonami. That was a channel by Cartoon Network, and they were the first to stop the censorship in the West. So it's funny how the children's networks seem to be making these changes that actually are going to harm kids. If you haven't heard of Toonami, Johnny Quest and Thundercats were the first shows on Toonami. I know my son watched those. And then Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon came a little bit later. They said, quote, "We just wanted to make sure people understood that this wasn't the sort of same cartoon that they have been used to seeing." Remember how the show's called The Agenda? This is revealing the agenda. I believe everything has an agenda. This was a different beast, they said. This is Gundam. It's almost a genre unto itself, and luckily there were no grown-ups around to tell us you can't do that for a kid's show. Now, interestingly enough, there's a series out now called Quiet on Set about Nickelodeon and how they abuse children sexually, physically, and emotionally. Okay, that if you haven't watched that series, watch it. It's very, very enlightening. And some of the characters on that documentary are kids that I remember my son watching on Nickelodeon. Now you've got Toonami, you've got Cartoon Network involved. So there's two of them. And it's all about making money for them. They don't care about your kids. They don't. So you have to guard the minds of your kids. There was a show called One Piece that was introduced in the 2000s. Those had a lot of mature content in them. We're talking violence, blood, sexual innuendos. The company itself ended up censoring it because it was so bad. Then there was another channel called Adult Swim that was introduced as an extension of Cartoon Network, but it was for adults. And it preserved the original content but added adult themes. There's a quote from Susan Napier, professor of Japanese studies at Tufts University. She said, "Japanese culture was confronting darker, exciting themes in a way that the U.S. and Europe seemed slower at adopting." Right now, there are over 430 anime production companies. And as of 2016, that's the last date I could pull, anime accounted for 60% of the world's animated TV. That's a huge amount. The industry is huge, very, very lucrative. And so we know money is a lust that people are tempted by. That's the push for all this. It's not just fun, friendly kid shows a lot of times. So now I want to talk to you about the manga and anime genres. This is a very important part. You might want to get a pen and paper out because we're going to talk about some of the ones that I think personally are despicable. There's a genre called yaoi. Female characters are the minor characters in that. It focuses on homosexual relationships between men, rape, and tragic events. It's usually written by women and marketed to women. I find that so ironic. There's another genre called yuri. It focuses on intimate relationships between female characters. We're talking lesbian type of behaviors in that one. There's another genre called bara, which focuses on male gay love with strong male physical characteristics. So beefy gays, that's what we're talking about in that one. There's another genre called shotacon, which focuses on prepubescent or pubescent boys in romantic and pornographic relationships. Whereas lolicon, or lolly for short, focuses on female characters of the same. There's Omegaverse, which is male-to-male romance, so gay romance. Originated in America with Star Trek fandom. So the original fans were Star Trek fans that got into Omegaverse. It follows the yaoi genre, became popular in 2010 and subsequent years, and promotes a caste system of characters. When I say caste, it's C-A-S-T-E. So it's hierarchy driven. There's another one that's called Dom-Sub. So Dom/Sub. That one is all about bondage, dominance, and sadomasochism. And it follows a caste system of characters. So again, hierarchical. There's another genre called shoujo, which is explicit material. So you can see that there's just all these genres that are dedicated to adult themes. I think even adults shouldn't be watching it myself, but you do you. I care about the kids, and I want us all to protect the kids and their innocence. I don't think it's godly to watch this kind of stuff, and here's the kicker. This is the really sad part. So just like with books, there is nothing on manga or anime medium that indicates what genre it is. Why does that matter? Well, like with movies, you have, 18 and over. You can kind of judge rated R, rated PG-13, all the different ratings on movies, which I think are very loose nowadays myself too, but that's another topic. But with these medium, there is nothing indicating that. You don't know if it's adult content or not. You don't know what's in it or not. Some of your kids are sitting in front of streaming networks that now have whole categories dedicated to anime, and you're not watching it with them. This is not a judgment for me, because I was guilty of that. And that's why I'm doing this, to educate you all about the risks from it and the dangers from it, because I learned the hard way. I don't want you to have to go through what I've gone through, or the people I know have gone through. It's really, really a bad thing. So let's look at slide 5. Now I want to show you some of the dark side of anime and manga. This is a series called Soul Eater. It talks about the Death Weapon Meister Academy, which is run by a character known as Death. I don't personally think that's appropriate for kids. I don't think it's something that we as Christians should be dabbling in or watching or allowing our kids to watch. It talks about how they have to collect the souls of 99 evil people and one witch. Dark content. Let's go to slide 6. This is Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is obviously a female or trans person, I don't know, with devil horns. Great wholesome content. Great for the kids. Enough said about that one. Let's go to the next slide. This is Death Note. Isn't that just happy and peppy, and doesn't it make you warm and fuzzy inside? This is another one that's out there that it's very popular. Next slide is Assassination Classroom. This one is about this teacher who's an incredibly powerful octopus-like creature who works as the junior high homeroom teacher. A group of rebel students are committed to assassinating him so as to prevent the Earth's destruction. That's the whole premise of that one. But I want you to look at this one. This one looks very benign, doesn't it? It looks kid-friendly. It looks like it's not that big a deal. You got a happy octopus. You got a big smiley face on it. It's yellow. It's very inviting, isn't it? But when you dig a little deeper, it's not so good. The next slide is Demon Slayer. This is just demonic looking. I'm not going to go into what that one's about. The next one is called I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. I mean, wholesome, good stuff for kids, right? Oh, my goodness. So those are just some of the ones that are out there and available. And I'm showing you just some because I just want you to understand. When you send your kids to the bookstore and you don't really pay attention to this anime and manga medium, this is what your kids could be getting, and you just have no idea. There was a guy who's a manga or anime creator that actually says everyone emanates cursed energy. That's what he believes. Let's go to slide 11. This is a man named Go Nagai. He's a manga author. This is a picture out of the magazine on page 26, and you can see his shirt. I want you to look at his shirt. One of his best-known works is called Devil Man. To me, that image on his shirt looks like a goat head. I'm sure you could excuse it away with, it's not really a goat head, it's a character. But to me, that is a goat head, and a goat head is pagan, anti-Christ religion. And then look at the bubble where he says, if people say you can't do something, then you want to do it even more. Is that not how the enemy works? I battle with that. Tell me I can't do something and I'm going to want to do it even more. That's the rebel in me. And I battle that on a daily basis because I just can't stand for people to tell me what to do. I'm grown, you know. You can't tell me what to do. It's pride. And God's really been working on me lately with that. This is also akin to the mantra of the Church of Satan. Do as thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. That's what they say. So do whatever you want. And then how many times in society do we hear, do what you want as long as it's not hurting someone? And I'm here to say, how do you know if it's hurting someone? How many times in your life have you said something you totally were innocent in trying to hurt somebody, but it hurt them anyway? I've done it. I think we all have. That's not something that you can control, really, in some cases. Does emotional hurt mean less than physical hurt to them? I don't know. But to me, I just find it interesting that we hear it all throughout society. Do what you want as long as it's not hurting someone. We hurt people all the time. So then what's the consequences if you do hurt someone to them? Is it bad to them? I don't know. Let's go to slide 12. Now we're going to look at some pagan and satanic symbols that are associated with anime and manga. This is Yu-Gi-Oh!, a very popular one that typically you start with Pokémon and then you go to Yu-Gi-Oh! And then Digimon. That's the kind of the evolution that naturally occurs for kids as far as interest goes. I want you to notice lots of triangles in the hair on the right. I want you to notice the Egyptian pagan symbolism on the left. You've got the Eye of Horus all over the place there. If you don't know what that is the third eye, you'll hear it called. It is basically Satan. It's a symbol that represents Satan. And then you have the Ankh, which is the cross-looking thing with the loop at the top. This is all Egyptian pagan symbols associated with Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's go to the next slide. This is for Yu-Gi-Oh's trading card game. Again, with the eye in the middle of the triangle. See the triangle? These are satanic pagan symbols, Egyptian symbols, and also Illuminati symbols. It's all the same. And then I know Josh mentioned there's an Ankh in here somewhere. I see it on the left side by the guy with the dark hair. I see it now. That is witchcraft, that's sorcery. Do you think we as Christians should be participating in that? Do you think we should allow our kids to participate in this? Have you been asleep like I was? It's time to wake up. Pokemon also deals with crystals. And, you know, my name's Crystal, so I kind of liked it. I'm not going to lie. I wanted my son to get the Pokemon Crystal game because, you know, that's my name. But anyways, crystals are all also like Wicca related, pagan related, Satanism related. Did you know that Pokemon also has 2 transgender villains, James and Jesse? I didn't know that until about 2 years ago. Did you know that Meowth, one of the characters, was voiced by a trans trailblazer? Didn't know that. What about Azrael? Azrael started being assigned genders in Generation 2, and Azrael evolves into Meryl, whose gender split. And then if you look at the whole of Pokemon, there used to be 150 characters last I knew, but now there's well over that. I think at some point that doubled. So there's a lot of characters, but there are several that now change genders as they evolve. Now, I want you to take a spiritual filter to that. now that I'm wiser, because I didn't think about it when I was younger, these characters evolve, right? What is that? Like evolution, do you think? A connection to that, maybe? They evolve, and then as they evolve, they can change genders. Why would a company do that? Don't you think there's an intent behind it and therefore an agenda behind it? We don't battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, and that enemy is very subtle, very sneaky, and can throw this stuff in, and we're asleep and we don't even see it. There's a new thing called Pokemon X and Y. It actually was released in 2010. A character in that, Shauna, is bisexual based on the avatar that the player picks. So the whole intention, according to the creator, was that Shauna would be a romantic interest in the show, in the series. And you, it's a game. So as a player, you pick your avatar. Well, Shauna's a female. So if you pick a female avatar, Shauna's going to buddy up to you in the game. And that's going to be a romantic relationship between two females. If you pick a male avatar, it's a male-female relationship. It's just things like that that are so subtle that plant seeds, again, that can grow and turn into actions. Let's talk about numbers. There's over 100 video games that were released in 2022 that are LGBTQ friendly. 100 video games. There are over 430 anime production companies, and as of 2016, anime accounted for 60% of the world's animated TV. I'm sure that's way higher now. Those are numbers I could pull in my research. Let's look at slide 14. I want you to notice the amount in this picture on the bottom left. I did a search for LGBT themes in manga. Look at the number, 96,047. So there's over 96,000 published manga books with LGBTQ plus themes. There were over 70,000 attendees at Gen Con last year. It's hosted in Indianapolis. There were over 150,000 attendees at Comic-Con last year, again, playing into this subculture thing because things tend to evolve into bigger things. So, like with the person I know, they were into anime and manga. Then it became the conventions and the chat rooms. And that has now produced fruit of transgenderism. Okay, so this is, again, why I'm very passionate about this topic, but it's not just me. We're going to watch a little bit of a video that is called Exploring My Gender Through Anime. So let's start that off.
Hi, my name is Chris. I have XY chromosomes. Currently, I use they/them pronouns or she/her pronouns when singular they is linguistically awkward, and I consider myself gender fluid. That is to say, I do not have a consistent enough conception of my own gender to want to ascribe to any particular label. Sometimes I feel more masculine, sometimes feminine, sometimes a blend of both, and sometimes neither. How did this happen? Obviously, the answer is endlessly complex and a combination of all of my life experiences, but anime has undoubtedly played a huge role in how I've formed the identity that I have. In this video, I hope to catalog the shows that I feel have influenced me the most, as well as explain in what ways they did so. And I suppose there's nowhere better to start than the absolute beginning of my relationship with this medium. The first anime I ever watched was a show called Fruits Basket. My older sister showed it to me when I was too young to remember. I must have been around 10 years old based on the fact that this happened in the house we lived in at the time. In reality, my first anime was probably Pokémon or one of the Ghibli films that my family kept DVDs of, but Fruits Basket was the first that I had contextualized as something different from the cartoons I was used to. The Danny Phantoms, the Scooby-Doos, the Phineas and Ferbs. I don't even particularly remember liking Fruits Basket, and after rewatching the show, I still don't, but I do find it a fascinating piece of my history with the medium. Just for a bit of context, Fruits Basket is about this girl named Toru Honda who begins the show living in a tent as a result of a family tragedy. A group of 3 boys decide to take her in, and they have a sort of curse placed upon them as a result of being part of the Zodiac family, which results in each of them turning into one of the many animals on the Zodiac calendar whenever they are touched by someone of the opposite sex. Hijinks and melodrama ensues. Here was a show that had a particular style of comedy, a particular flow of conversation that I had never seen before. It didn't look like anything I'd previously seen, and it certainly took itself a little more seriously. It felt a little more adult than anything I'd been exposed to. If you've seen Fruits Basket, then it shouldn't surprise you.
Thanks. So this is a first-person account, this whole video of how anime and manga influenced their gender identity. And I want to call to your attention, you probably saw this, that he mentioned Pokemon. Back to that. He mentioned this Fruits Basket one that he was exposed to as an early child and didn't really even like it, but he continued to watch it. Then the whole premise of it being 3 boys that took a girl in, that's a little weird. They had a curse on him as part of the Zodiac, which both of those things are witchcraft. It's just crazy, like the things that are in these mediums. And unless you're sitting there watching them with your kid or you pre-screen them, you have no idea what's in these. Some of the series have hundreds of episodes, and it's not going to be in every episode. They're going to throw it in here. They're going to throw it in there. You're going to miss it if you're not paying attention. Let's continue with the next part of it.
The fact of the matter is that my introduction to this medium was through the perspective of Honda Toru, a soft, kind-hearted schoolgirl. Not quite the macho take action and get shit done protagonist.
So this part, excuse the profanity, but not me saying it. This part is calling your attention to the fact that he's identifying with a female in this particular series. That's the temptation, isn't it? Let's go on and you'll see more revealed.
The time. And as no shortage of you have probably noticed by now, this was me, a still developing little boy, relating to a female character by way of learning values that are traditionally more feminine in nature. And if I hadn't already been inundated with the way our society ascribes genders to different behaviors, Fruits Basket definitely made sure I was, taking no shortage of opportunities to reinforce male and female stereotypes throughout the story. All
right. Remember we talked about in an episode previously that God didn't create the idea that girls like pink and dolls and boys like trucks and blue. All right? He didn't create that. That's not in the Bible. You're not going to find it. Who created it then? Society did. Okay? Now, there have always been divergence from that. I'm one of them. I mentioned before, I like to play outside and get out in the dirt, and I wasn't a girly girl when I was little. I'm still not. I can run a bobcat and a backhoe. And I can build patios and fence and deck. But I'm also like nail polish, and I like my makeup, and I like to do my hair. So I'm kind of both. But I'm fully aware that if I were growing up today, they would probably rush me into gender affirmation therapy and say, you're really a boy inside. And I would be going down that path. So it's despicable to me what they're doing to kids. Society creates the problem, and then society supposes the solution, right? Typical of humankind, especially those that seek power and lust after power. Let's create a chaotic situation, and then we'll suggest the solution to it. That's how they move people to where they want them to be in society. It's social engineering 101. And we see that happening all over the place. Well, you understand that this poor guy, and I keep looking over at the monitor in case anybody's wondering. I'm watching it on a monitor. But this poor guy is talking about how he identified with the female characters because he didn't feel fully like the male butch characters, if you will. It's a draw for him. And don't think it won't happen to your child too. Because if there are black and white role descriptors, they're going to try to figure out where they fit. Okay? So let's continue because he goes on to talk about more.
anime to be like. Yet again, this is an example of a main character / audience surrogate who is a girl, and in this case one who dresses as a boy at that. For whatever reason though, I wasn't as interested in Host Club. Not that I cared though, because I had already
Let's go to the next one because I think that was pretty self-explanatory. You caught the fact that it's a girl dressed as a boy.
More anime on my own. A year or two later, I would stumble across Soul Eater, which would single-handedly shape many of my aesthetic sensibilities and ones that have persisted in me to this day. And while I wouldn't quite call it a favorite of mine, I'd be hard-pressed to say that this hasn't been one of the most influential anime I've ever watched. Soul Eater.
Let's go on to the next part. I think you're seeing a theme throughout this guy's account of the impact it's had on him. And I also hope you're seeing what I was saying about young children are impressionable. We plant seeds. Society plants seeds. And those seeds can turn into thoughts that get entertained, that can turn into actions. It may take years for it to occur. It's not going to happen overnight necessarily. A tree doesn't grow overnight. We have to be very careful what we expose our kids to. We got it?
Along its run, we meet a wealth of unique and entertaining characters, but standing out among them in my eyes was this skinny little pink-haired kid named Krona. Now, Krona is a fantastic character in their own right, but what's obviously important for the sake of this video is that they are androgynous. And this was a characteristic that I had never encountered before. From the first moment that Krona showed up on screen, I was entirely fascinated with them because I couldn't fit them into a definitively male or female box. And this was, of course, at an age when I hadn't really conceived of the idea of androgyny, let alone gender as a separate characteristic than sex. Like I said, by this point in my life, I had already picked up on what are traditionally male and female gender roles, and I very much used them as a heuristic to gauge certain aspects of the characters I saw on TV, as well as the real-life people that I interacted with. But I couldn't do that with Krona. I couldn't confidently make assumptions about the type of person they were based on what sex I perceived them to be. And as such, I think I paid more attention to the individual actions that they take and behaviors they exhibit throughout the show. That way I could put together a mental understanding of this character. And again, I definitely was not consciously aware of any of this stuff going on in my brain, but rather I am inferring how this show and this character affected me based on the reactions I remember having to them and making connections to the way that I act now. In Krona's specific case, I think that I internalized the way that I couldn't really fit them into a box like I could the other characters, and how that caused me to think of them as a more individual person, because that is what I want for myself now. Part of why I currently identify as gender fluid is because I want people to view me the way I viewed Krona.
Okay. Two things out of that segment. Number one, I want to highlight the word androgynous. The whole way this occurred to me, I was trying to figure out how someone got to the point of wanting to transition. I knew they had been into this pretty much their whole life. I was at the bookstore with my friend looking for Christmas presents. It was around Thanksgiving. And I saw 3 full walls, stacks of manga books. And it jumped out at me as I looked at the book covers that all of the characters looked androgynous. And it's like God led me to that, because when I started thinking about that, that's what started me down the path of the research I've done on this. If you look at the characters, a lot of them do look androgynous. That's also intentional. That's not by accident. Part of gender confusion is, again, you have black and white girl and boy roles in characteristics, which I have to tell you, when you're talking about transgenders, especially female to male, they're always looking at just physical characteristics. They're not really looking at emotional characteristics. They'll paint their faces up and they'll wear a wig and they'll put girl clothes on. That doesn't make you a female. Sorry about you. Does not make you a female. Okay? So they're focusing on that. But do you understand why then anime and manga are a draw for people, the younger generations? It's because they don't have those black and white roles. They don't have to meet expectations. They don't have to fit in a box, as he said. Again, I'm going to say it again. God didn't create the boxes. We complement each other, males and females, in a wide variety of roles. But wearing pink and playing with dolls or wearing blue and playing with trucks isn't one of them. That's not something God created. It's something that the world created in order to get us to this point with the confusion, to swoop in with the solution. And that's not of God. That's of the enemy. I'm convinced of it. Part of the draw to this is they just want to be seen also. They want to be seen as an individual, not as part of a group. So they don't want to necessarily be a boy or girl. Sometimes, as he says in this video, and I encourage you to watch the whole thing, the reference will be in the bottom. Sometimes they feel feminine about something. Sometimes they feel male about something. That's where you get the non-binary. That's where you get the gender fluid. They don't quite understand the concept that God sees us as an individual. That's how he created us. We may have female chromosomes or male chromosomes, and there is a purpose, a very defined purpose for that, a well-designed purpose for that. But you don't have to be in a box. The world put you in the box. So that's something I feel very strongly about. God loves us for who he created. And I'm sick and tired of hearing people say that are trans, you don't accept me for who I am. I'm going to throw that back at him and say, no, you don't accept you for who you are. You were born with a beautiful characteristic about you. You were born for a purpose. You were created by God for a purpose. He did that. And you are the one that aren't accepting it, and you're seeking something else to make you feel better. The saddest part to me, though, is when it comes to kids. Again, I mentioned this before, when they go through puberty, over 80% now they're finding would have outgrown gender dysphoria if they had just left them alone. Instead, we're rushing them into all these treatments. Now I want to take a little bit of a different take on it. There is also, I mentioned before, a definite connection between autism and anime and manga, the draw to it. There's a website, you'll find the link in the bottom. It's on realrundown.com, and it's titled Why Are Autistic People Drawn to Anime, written by Rachel Leffler in 2022. One of her quotes is, but psychologists and special education teachers have noticed that many autistic adults and children like anime and manga. There's no official research, but people on the autism spectrum may be more likely to be into anime and manga as fans than neurotypical people. Let's put up slide 15. Why is that? I know people on the spectrum, and I can speak to this very well. Here's 8 reasons autistic people love anime. Number 1, an escape from reality. Look around you. Our world sucks. We all know it. It's sick. Our world is sick. Our world is degenerating. Our societies are degenerating. Our education system is degenerate. Everything is not good. I saw statistics the other day of a chart. I wish I would have captured it, but it talked about in the 1960s, that's the last time that children ended up making more money than their parents. It's been on a steady decline ever since then. We have the inflation. We have the wars. We have the rumors of wars, as the Bible predicts. We have secular humanism taking over our society, godlessness. Now we're seeing the protests on college campuses, and we're seeing lawlessness. We're seeing also illegal immigrants that are committing heinous crimes and not being prosecuted or being flipped back out on the street. Absolute lawlessness, anarchy going on at the college campuses. Our reality isn't good. Let's face it. And a lot of kids are drawn to this because, again, it's fantasy / imaginations, and it's an escape from that reality. Number 2, friendship lessons. Kids on the spectrum have social anxiety a lot of times, and they're inept at social skills. The reason for that a lot of times is because they can't read people very well. They think in terms of very black and white. So this happens, and then that happens, and that happens, and they need structure and they need rules to follow. And social skills are too vague for them. They don't read social cues very well. But in anime and manga, it's very clear. They're very animated characters, so they show the emotion on the face in an exaggerated way. They can take social cues from anime and manga a lot easier than they can in society. Number 3, easy to read emotionally. Again, that goes back to it's not hard to follow. There's no abstract in anime and manga. It's very direct. There's a plot. There's very good social cues and instruction. It's just easier for them to process. And number 4, formality of Japanese culture. I didn't understand why the person I know was so into Japanese culture. I didn't know that anime and manga were from Japan at the time. Japanese culture is so ironic because their culture is not forgiving of anything LGBTQ. Like, they're very strict in their culture against it. But for some reason, they allow the anime and manga, and I think it's as an outlet. And there's also a lot of speculation that a lot of homosexuality does go on in Japan. They just keep it on the down low. They keep it behind scenes. So, but kids are drawn to that formality, especially if they're on the spectrum, because they need the rules and they need the structure, and Japanese culture is very much that way. Number 5, anime equals community. There are Discord groups, Reddit groups, chat rooms, even video gaming communities that are dedicated to anime and manga. Also, there are a lot of them that are dedicated to LGBTQ, and a lot of times they cross-pollinate. They do. So the people in the community that like the same types of things, all of us like to be around people that have the same interests as we do. We all like that. But because kids on the spectrum are so different, and especially in the social skills aspect, they have quirks about them too. They like quirky things sometimes, things that are different, things that are unique. They don't like the status quo. They don't like standardized things, except for in their structure and in their routines and in their rules that they follow and things like that. But in their social aspect, they're really drawn to things that are unique. Being around those kind of like-minded people gives them a sense of community. They don't always fit in with everybody else. So that provides kind of a community for them. And again, I'm going to go back to the cult description I gave you. What do cults often do? They entice you to come in. Almost all of them will say, your family doesn't accept you. Well, that's okay. We will. Almost all of them do. And they want to become your family. And then the minute you go against it, they are the most vicious people towards you that you would ever see. You're kicked out. You're a suppressive person. You're not allowed to speak to them anymore or anybody in their group anymore. You're cut off out on the street. It's the same with this type of community. Number 6, relatable struggles. Many of them, and it goes along with number 7, anime confronts bullying. A lot of the kids that are on the spectrum do get bullied a lot at school. Well, anime and manga have situational storylines and plots to them that help with that. So oftentimes the characters are being bullied, and then they work through it and they come to learn how to deal with bullying, and part of that is develop new friends that are like-minded. So again, it goes back to the community aspect. And then number 8, anime equals information. Kids on the spectrum, I told you, I don't feel like it's a disability. I feel like they're very special because they're extremely intelligent a lot of times. And so they thrive on information. I know the one I know, when McDonald's would come out with a new collection of McDonald's toys, Happy Meal toys, I would have to take him. Well, I wouldn't have to, but he would beg me to take him all the time because he just needed to complete that collection. Okay. That is information to them. The 300 and some Pokémon, last I knew, characters. There's books, like guidebooks about it. Plus you have the trading cards that have all the weaknesses and strengths on them. It's incredibly hard to memorize and learn all those characters and all their characteristics. But the person I knew did it no problem. I was amazed at the ability to rattle off these strengths, weaknesses, characteristics for, at the time, over 150. And then during that time period, it went to over 300. And same thing. Just they crave information. And so it gives them something to look forward to. Another thing, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's actually part of the subculture is bronies. I had never heard of that. That's young adult men who are actually into My Little Ponies, which is an anime or a cartoon. I'm not sure if it's anime actually, but My Little Ponies is a cartoon series. I thought it was so weird that boys were into My Little Ponies. But again, that's a thing as part of the subculture, and I believe it has to do with the draw to that whole situation where they get information, they find a community, it's part of fitting in, that kind of thing. There was actually a manga store in Birmingham and Glasgow in the UK. There's a BBC documentary on it. I can't remember the name of it, but if you can find it, you should watch it if you have an interest in this, because they go deep into the appeal for autistic people. They actually have a thing where every Tuesday they call it Calm Tuesdays. And those who are overstimulated can come to this store and they play soft music. They have calmer staff and everything. And they plan that out for Tuesdays in particular. You might have heard a few years ago, the big rage in New York was adult daycare centers where adults could go and play and take a nap, just like you would do at a daycare. And it was wildly popular with particularly the millennials. They're looking for something. And I think they've been so coddled as a generation that they have a hard time, again, coping with real life. And so they want to escape. It's all an escape. So in closing, I hope you understand there is a connection between the autism spectrum, ADD, and anime and manga, although that's not the whole purpose of tonight's episode. To me, that part of it is very exploitive towards kids. Look at the different kinds of anime and manga. Look at how vile some of them are. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many of them. And there's pages on, I want to say threads actually, on Reddit that you can follow if you're interested, that talk about their anime and manga communities. And they go into far more of the different titles that are out there in detail. There's a YouTube channel. If you have issues, I've had people tell me when I presented this, they had no idea about all of this. And at one presentation, people were coming up to me every break. I got cornered in the bathroom with people telling me that they had seen children in their lives, whether it be kids or grandkids, showing signs of being confused about their gender, and they couldn't figure out what it was, but they're into anime and manga. And after I did the presentation, they were saying things like, I had no idea what it was, but now I do. So thank you for talking about this. It's not being talked about much. I've seen some of the major podcasters touch on it, but none of them have done the research. I have them. They don't go into detail about this. So I hope you've learned some things about that and what risks are out there and what to look for. And for For God's sake, please protect your kids that are in your life. Again, not all anime and manga is bad. Big disclaimer. I don't want people coming for me about that. But the fact is, again, they're not labeled with the genre. So is it a risk you're willing to take? In the next episode, we're going to be talking about furries and conventions. In some future episodes, we're going to talk about the D-trans population. I know that's a big topic, and they're actually starting to do studies now, so we actually have data to talk about. If you like the content and you want to know more, be sure to go to revolverbroadcasting.com and like this video, share this video, subscribe, and please put comments, because those push it up in the algorithm, and I think I'm fighting shadow banning here, so I could use all the help you could give me. And we do read the comments and get back to people. And with that, I will wish you a great night or day, whichever it is, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in.